We know that mothers nurture, love and protect their children, it's only a few that does the opposite, and so is the mother of Vida. She did the unimaginable. But before we go into the story, if you are a fan of true life stories, then do subscribe and press the notification button to be notified whenever we post a new true life story. This is how Vida narrated her story. My name is Vida, and I'm married, but since I got married, anytime I got pregnant I would miscarry. I got pregnant on 3 occasions and I lost all of them, and so when I got pregnant for the 4th time, the doctors advised to stitch my womb and it was done. I was then told not to lift anything heavy as it would affect the pregnancy. Due to this, my husband had been doing everything I needed for me. In fact, because of me my husband started reporting to work late and it was bothering me, so I suggested to my husband to allow my mother to come and assist me at home so he would be free. My husband objected to that and rather suggested his sister to come over. I also told him that I would relate with my mother better than his sister, therefore I prefer my mother to come and assist me with the house chores. Reluctantly, my husband agreed, and my mother came to stay with us. I must say that my mother is quite young. She gave birth to me early, therefore, she is still young. At this moment, my mother is about 47 years old and I'm 28 years old. We live in a story building. My room is on the 1st floor and my mother was given one of the rooms on the ground floor of the building. However, the hall and the kitchen are all on the ground floor, therefore, I only descend to the hall only when I want to chat with my mother or relax and watch the television. When my mother arrived, she took over all the household chores, cooking, washing and any other work that must be done in the house. I could not do anything due to the pregnancy. My husband on the other hand was assisting my mother by taking her to the market and any other place she wanted to go and provided her with whatever she needed for the house. Everything seemed to be going on well, until, one day, I decided to go down to the hall to relax and chat with my mother as usual. Whilst there, my mother received a phone call. She then brought the phone to me saying that it's my uncle who wanted to talk with me. My uncle wanted to find out whether everything is going well with me. I told him all was well, but just when I ended the call with my uncle, I noticed that my mother had received a text message. I wondered who might send her a message, so I jokingly remarked that my mother now had a boyfriend and she never told me. When I looked at the message, it read, "I can't wait to have you tonight." I was surprised and curiously decided to look at the number that sent the message, and lo and behold, it was my husband's number. My husband had sent a message to my mother telling her that he could not wait to have her that night. I was shocked and suddenly felt like urinating. I didn't say or ask my mother anything. I rather decided to sleep early that day to find out whether the message was true or not. My husband had this habit of waking up at 12 midnight to 1 a.m. to pray, so as usual, he woke up that time thinking that I was asleep. I then waited for about 10 minutes and started following him to be sure if he was going to pray or going to sleep with my mother. When I got to the hall, I did not see him there, so I moved slowly to my mother's door only to hear my husband and my mother expressing love to each other. Not long afterwards they started making love, and the shocking part was that my husband was told my mother what he tells me when he is making love to me. I was so shocked at this point that I urinated on myself. I then sat down behind the door waiting for them. When they were done and my husband came out, I shouted, "Darling," and he also screamed, "Jesus." My mother then rushed out and the only thing she said was, "Did she follow you here?" I then held my mother by her cloth, but she quickly pulled herself away, ran into her room and locked the door behind her. I then started banging her door and asking her whether she wanted to destroy my marriage or take my husband from me. My husband couldn't stand the embarrassment, so he went out the house, sat in his car and drove off at that odd hour. He came back after 3 days. Before he returned, he did not pick my call. I then called my uncle to come and listen to what was happening. Fortunately, my husband was at home when he came. I then told my uncle to ask my husband and my mother what was going on, but none of them talked. Suddenly, my husband knelt down before me and started apologizing to me, but I told him that, for me to accept his apology, my mother must leave the house. My uncle also told my mother to leave, but interestingly my mother said my uncle should take the lead first and she would follow. In fact, I got so furious that I slapped my husband and told him that if he doesn't send my mother away then I would leave. When my uncle asked my mother whether it was true that my husband slept with her, she refused to answer. Both were quiet. I am so deeply hurt that my own biological mother was able to sleep with my husband. My mother refused to leave, so I left the house. At the time, I was about 8 months pregnant. I went and stayed with a friend and I gave birth. 3 months after giving birth, I decided to go back to my husband's house with the intention of settling every issue that had occurred, but when I got to the house, I saw my husband was sitting down and my mother, who was now pregnant, had put her head on his laps. I could not stand the scene, so I shouted at my mother and said, "Mummy, you are causing an abomination. Don't you know that what you are doing is not good?" My mother was pregnant for my husband. My husband stood up and asked me what I was doing there, and he pushed me out of the room and locked the door. I cried and asked him to open the door, but they did not bother me, so I left and went straight to see my uncle to let him know what had happened. Unfortunately, my uncle was sick, so he only told me to wait. When he got better, he would come and talk to my husband and mother. However, he advised me not to tell anybody about the issue. I couldn't also tell anybody. What my friend knew was that my husband had sacked me from the house because of another woman. Meanwhile, that woman in question is my mother. I couldn't tell that my mother had taken my husband from me. When I left my uncle's place, I went to see my mother's pastor and told him that my husband had sacked me from the house, so he should accompany me to go and apologize and beg them to forgive me in case I had done something against them. When we arrived at the house and knocked on the door, nobody bothered to open the door for us. My mother saw us standing there but refused to open the door, and so we left. My husband had told all his siblings that I was pregnant and had left the house to stay with another man. Though this was not true, I could not find the courage to tell them that he had impregnated my mother. My child is now 8 months old, and I know my mother had given birth. My uncle, who promised to sit on the issue too, is now dead. I am now stranded because of what my mother had done to me. This is the true life story of Vida. If you have any advice, please leave it in the comments section below and don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.